Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Hearing Things with Julie and Brad. Today we are recording from a new background. Just going to shaking things up. This is the Red Room, but no. All you Shining fans out there? No? Anyway, so we're going to talk about something a little controversial today. Helen Keller. And so, yeah, she's already seething. So it's going to be interesting to hear. And it goes back into basically the theme of our show, right? There's no one way to be deaf. Mm-hmm. And so she was obviously deaf and blind. Well, not obviously, but it's a pretty well-known story. So I think most people do know that she was deaf and blind. She had the famous teacher, Anne Sullivan. What's the movie? The Miracle Worker? Yeah, she can't even keep it together. So I'm just going to preface it there saying that we have Helen Keller as the paragon of overcoming a disability. And now Julie is going to rant.
She just... oh! Helen Keller, to me, in my opinion, is a problematic figure for many reasons. I do not have an issue with her personally or her life or who she was. I absolutely recognize that she had incredible accomplishments. I think it's important to note that she was from a family of privilege and means. Mm. And I think that's something that also gets lost, that was not the common experience for everyone with such a significant disability as to what she had. But I got to tell you, the hero worship that is poured into Helen Keller just upsets me to the nth degree, because she is the only exemplar that's held up in educational literature, curriculums, mainstream culture, as the example of someone with a hearing loss. You never hear about any other notable figures, and it just gets on my nerves as a 29-year special educator and as a kid growing up in the American school system. Yeah. Every time Helen Keller was mentioned, I have vivid memories of this, especially in elementary school. Helen Keller would show up in the curriculum. Now I'm getting crazy. And everyone would turn and look at me.
Oh, really?
Like, what do you want me to do? No. And I think people would make a lot of assumptions about my abilities based on, well, this is how Helen functions, so therefore Julie must be the same. It's very inflammatory topic, so I'm just going to dive right into my notes here. I'm going to start ranting and not stop. So, one of my goals at the elementary school where I teach is to really address Helen with the greater staff. And our new reading curriculum had a section in it that, again, held up Helen as our exemplar and talked about overcoming a disability. I need to clarify for everyone watching that that's not a thing. Okay, you don't overcome your disability. Overcoming implies that it goes away, you don't have to deal with it, it's no longer a challenge. Last time I checked, there's no cure for this. Okay, we're not overcoming anything. No. We are adapting, I think that would be a better term. We're adapting, we're learning, we're accommodating, we're making modifications to function in a world that I say all the time is not designed for us, but we're not overcoming anything. The second issue with Helen being portrayed the way she is, and I think this also extends itself to disabilities in general when you're talking about disability, you have to start making the least dangerous assumption. Okay? I think assumptions are made when you hear, they're deaf. Oh, well, automatically you have a preconceived bullet point list of what this person is going to sound like, how they're going to communicate, who they are, what their intelligence level may be. We have to start assuming the least dangerous assumption and assume competence, okay, in communication, overall functioning. The other issue with Helen Keller, there are many, is that a disability is not a one-size-fits-all condition. And I think that's the other thing where it gets really dangerous, holding her up as some kind of blazing example of someone that overcame a disability. It's not the same experience for everyone. So she's also the default. Every time someone with a hearing loss is mentioned in literature, she's the one we go to. How many years are we out from this woman? Over 100 at this point. 120? I don't have the number in front of me. But come on, there are other many solid examples of other people with a hearing loss. Dame Evelyn Glennie comes to mind right away. She's a Scottish drummer. She's amazing. We featured her book Listen on the show before. And actually, I used her story as a potential substitute for the third grade curriculum to take Helen out and pop Dame Evelyn Glennie in as a more contemporary figure who's also more relatable to the kids.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Helen Keller, again, it's like this mythic hero worship godly figure that's just make me crazy. Okay.
Deep breath.
All right. So I talk about overcoming a disability, and it's not a thing. I mean, I can tell you, speaking from my own experience, someone I've had a hearing loss since I got my first hearing aids at 4. They just happen to be as much a part of my body as it is a personality trait, or my dimples, or my brown eyes, or my sense of humor, or my passionate rants that I go on when things upset me. And the language I use with kids is my body works differently than yours. So they understand that this is something that's just the way Mrs. Lane's body works, not something I need to overcome or, whatever. One of the quotes in the curriculum that we had adopted at school was, "People with disabilities face extra challenges in life. However, these disabilities don't keep determined people from doing amazing things." I took some issue with that wording because, again, we all have challenges. Mm-hmm. We all have determination. This implies to me that disability is always automatically an assumed hindrance to what someone wants to do. And it tiptoes into that danger of having the disability automatically define someone's trajectory in their life. Of like, oh, well, if you didn't have this thing, maybe you could do this. Or you have this, so it's automatically going to be that much harder to you. And then you're going to talk, this is a whole other show. We're going to do this show.
Okay.
There's reality that plays in here, right? Like, yes, there are some things I can't do because of my hearing loss that would not be safe. I should not be in the armed services.
Right.
Do you want me leading you across enemy lines in the jungle where we're supposed to be quiet? No, you don't.
Well, maybe with this rant, right? You could scare everybody away.
Scare everybody away. But there are things you have to rely on your ears for.
For sure.
I'm not going to be a great airline pilot. Headphones aren't going to fly. Okay? Literally. So it's just some things to think about with Helen. I know I'm all over the place. I know I'm on a rant. But I was very pleased with the reception that I received with the staff at work, and also the librarians. Amazing. I was able to go through our library collection and weed out outdated books on Helen Keller that were just needed to be gone.
Yeah. And
have been able to do a review of actually all of the books in the library having to do with hearing loss and deaf and hard of hearing topics. And you and I have been reviewing piles of children's books, so I'm also able to make some recommendations for purchase as well. But I have a huge issue with Helen as always being the default that we turn to for discussion of disability all the time. It's problematic, and her time has come to an end. Although, to redeem Helen, she did own a Boston Terrier.
Well, yeah.
I'll give her that.
Yeah. So, but that kind of fits in your theme, right? It is not all or nothing. You can have problems with her, but you got to give her props for having a Boston, right?
I'll give her the dog.
So I just wanted.
What do you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something about plagiarism. And so this is interesting. I can't remember which book I read this in, but Helen Keller, when she was 13, wrote a short story, or did she? And so it was something. It's called the Frost King Incident, and her teacher, Anne Sullivan, thinks that people think there may have been plagiarism on another story that came out like right before. And so what do we got here? So. Okay, so I'll just read some quotes here, and I'll put this link in the description. So this has come from Perkins, which is where Anne Sullivan worked, Perkins School for the Blind. And so some viewed the plagiarism claims as an indictment of Sullivan's teaching methods, implying that Keller was simply mimicking Sullivan rather than forming her own ideas and her experiences. And so I that might be the case. For like when she's 13, but if you read more about her later in life, she was a really smart woman, and also a communist at the end of her life.
Communist or socialist? I
get those mixed up.
I think it was socialist.
It was one of those.
Doesn't matter. It was at the time for American history. It was not a thing you wanted.
So nothing. And so there we go. So someone came to Helen Keller's defense. You might have heard of him, Mark Twain. So he said in a letter to Helen, he said, "Oh dear me, how unspeakably funny and owlishly idiotic and grotesque that plagiarism farce." It's very long-winded. As if there was much substantially all ideas are secondhand, consciously and unconsciously drawn from a million outside sources, and daily used by the garnered with pride and satisfaction born of the superstition that originated them. So he
was amazing.
He was great.
His word choice is fantastic.
Yeah, he's fantastic. So even like that shows more nuance, but you don't hear anything about it because it's hard, right? It's hard. Everything is nuanced, and there's so much more details you can get into about everything. So I understand that you have to cut it off at a certain point, but like to lie by omission, right? That's just as harmful. And so I think heroes should have flaws, right? They're more obtainable that way. So don't whitewash all the controversies around people. And not for nothing though, even if Helen was someone that we could get behind as a model, you have to have a newer model. What are we talking here? Early 1900s? So this is like kids today cannot relate to her situation. I remember in the Miracle Worker, the movies, the thing about the water pump, right? Who the hell growing up nowadays knows what a water pump is?
I work with children all day. I can tell you none.
Okay, good.
Zero.
So,
and we have two great people right here that would be great in the curriculum. Call us! Listen, Harcourt World out there doing the textbooks. I got you.
Yeah, I think that our message here is really just like do some more reading, do some more critical thinking, and question things, and don't assume that one size fits all for anything. And of course, our show is hearing related, so we're going to focus on making sure that that you kind of know the nuance for hearing.
And in fairness to Helen, it's how she's portrayed by others that I have a bigger issue with. Really, I really don't have an issue with her herself.
Yep.
The issue is with the hero worship and just the way she's just the default.
Yep.
So I thank you for letting me take the time to get it out, because we know it just kind of burns me a little bit. And to everybody listening, I appreciate you considering my viewpoint. It doesn't mean it's the right one, and there's certainly more than one way to think about it. So I'd love to hear from people what your thoughts are about Helen Keller and how it informs your thinking about people with hearing loss or people that are deaf, whichever preferred term.
Right, yeah, so that's the thing, right? It's another thing, right? Terminology. Just because I use hard of hearing and Julie uses hearing impaired doesn't mean either one is right. It's just the preferred term. So don't be afraid to make a mistake when it comes to stuff like this, right? So like Julie will definitely correct you. I might silently judge you, but you have to know.
But ask the curious question. That's what I say to my students all the time too.
Great.
I work with 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. I tell them all the time, I'm like, if you have a question about disabilities or hearing loss or Mrs. Lane's life, ask the curious questions. It's okay to get the information. Yep. Don't sit and think and wonder and not ever have the right answer. Or a right answer.
Is there any such thing as a right answer?
Yes.
Yeah.
When I'm speaking.
My apologies.
We know how this works. All right. I'll go first.
Go.
Switch to books. So we like to do, Brad more than me, but I'm getting more into it, research on nonfiction things, and he's the one that definitely has more of the depth for some of the things we talk about. But I love reading nonfiction, and we have a favorite podcast that we both love.
We do.
Stuff You Should Know podcast. Shout out to Chuck and Josh. Here we are, and Jerry too.
Can't forget Jerry.
And this is fantastic. It's really fun book. They take all kinds of interesting topics and they break it down. A lot of background, a lot of fun facts, a lot of trivia. The footnotes in here are actually funnier than some of the content they write. They're so awesome. Great. So you can see I tabbed a bunch of things. I really enjoyed this. I highly recommend picking this up and also listening to their podcast. And in the back of this book is a podcast list of similar topic podcasts that line up with some of the content they wrote. And what I loved is that this book isn't the topics they discuss, they haven't done full podcasts on, so it's new information. So it's like a listener of the show, you're going to get some new stuff here. Yeah. So
I love how it's mostly interesting.
Interesting.
It's a compendium of mostly interesting stuff.
It's awesome. Highly recommend pick this up and listen to the podcast. They're awesome. And if you're out there, Chuck and Jerry and Josh.
Yes.
No, don't call us. We won't answer.
Right.
Email us.
Yes,
whatever.
Email
Find us. We'll come on the show.
How deafness works.
You know what? I might send that email tomorrow.
Do it.
Why not? What do you got?
So I have, speaking of different people to uphold the deaf tradition, I guess you can say. So can you see this? Yeah.
There you go.
So it's True Biz by Sara Novic. So True Biz is ASL slang for like real talk. And so it's about a young girl who goes to a deaf residency school, and she has cochlear implants, and she has no contact with the deaf world until she's in that deaf world. And it really highlights how there are two different worlds. With the hearing world and the deaf world. And so it's a residency school, meaning that she goes and lives there, and her father comes for ASL classes at night. And so it's kind of
non-fiction or fiction?
Fiction. It's fiction. And so it's a fiction book. And so Sara Novic she's actually the author. I can't see that.
What are you doing?
I went somewhere else. Anyway, Sara Novic is the author. you always get the links, so please look at that. She's also deaf, so she signs.
My question. Okay,
yeah,
good.
she's nonverbal, so that's really why I went for it. Is because there's not too many books out there about deafness or hard of hearing. So I really gravitate towards those to kind of like see myself in literature, right? I mean, it's not as life-threatening as not seeing yourself if you're one of the more oppressed minorities, but there's still something to it.
There's something to be said about seeing yourself. That's not Helen Keller.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right.
Here I go again. She's all we had.
Yeah. And
so finally, things are starting to change. So I'm excited to see
there's
that.
more books. So like I love that book because it was the first book that had like a deaf or hard of hearing character that like made the New York Times list. I mean, you have like Niall DeMarco, the Deaf Utopia. He that's nonfiction, but like a fiction book with like a deaf lab. If you want to get like technical, Nick Andros from The Stand was deaf, so but he was like a side character,
right?
And so this is fun. This is fundamentally centered around the deaf culture, and it was fantastic to see.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
Never know. Maybe we'll be on that list one day.
One can hope. Something to strive towards, right?
She's gonna
make it happen. She's a dynamo.
That Today's Show, Oprah's calling. Like, we got stuff to do, people. Well, thank you everybody for listening and accepting our perspectives, and we'd love to hear from you as always. So comment below and reach out on Facebook, hunt us down, whatever.
Hunt us. That sounds violent.
That didn't sound right. Don't do that.
Don't hunt us. Seek us out. There we go.
Seek us out. All right.
All right, guys.
Thanks, guys. Take care.